let everyone know that we are going to be recording this meeting so that we have the opportunity to share this on social media for folks who can't make today's meeting. And again, for folks who signed up online, this is really going to be focused on activation and taking some of these ideas from concept and moving them forward. I want to thank our annual sponsors. As you can see here, they sponsor ULI every year to make sure that we can provide great content and really keep to support Sacramento in an equitable way. For folks who are not familiar with ULI, our mission is to provide leadership and responsible use of land and creating sustainable and thriving communities worldwide. And that's all over. And our real role here in Sacramento is to bring folks together like we're doing on this call and make sure that we do our best to ensure that everybody has access to a secure neighborhood and a high quality of life. And so we're excited to engage in that conversation again with you all today. So just real brief recap, again, why South Sacramento, why Meadowview, why is ULI involved? Again, we're really committed to the goals of equity. We really want to make sure that we take the technical expertise we have in this great region and today all the way across all over the United States and provide that with the local expertise of community members and community advocates to come up with great solutions and really build off existing assets as they stand in Meadowview. We're really committed to collaboration in this process. And again, we want to make sure we're respecting the past, but collaborating in the present to make sure we're striving for a better future for everybody. As our friend Dr. Flo shared with us last presentation, really the concepts of health and equity are important in the environments that we live in. And again, those environments shape our health. Again, our history, our story, our values, our experience, our personhood, all of that together. I wish I could say as well as Dr. Flo, but just want to remind folks again, why health and equity combined with land use concepts. That is why we really are concerned about the health and quality of life of everyone and feel that we can impact that by improving the built environment with community-led activation. And just the last recap and baselining from last few meetings. Again, this came from the surveys back in March and was reaffirmed in all of the polling that we did in the last meeting, is that the people, the open spaces, the diversity is what makes Meadowview unique. We want to build off of those assets. Again, we don't want to focus on the deficits. We want to focus on the assets and how we make the community even better by leveraging that. So how we take those assets in Meadowview and ensure that it grows in the direction that community members are looking for. Again, just a snapshot of a few of the assets that we have. Again, in terms of this call today, we're going to ask the folks keep their phones on mute for the time being, but there's going to be some opportunities for folks to chat in. And we're going to also ask that folks, if they can, use the chat box that is located on the bottom of your screen. So actually, for a quick moment here, what I'm going to do as I introduce the team is make sure that if folks haven't got a chance to use the chat box, if you could just put your name in the chat box and maybe one word expressing something that you're looking forward from tonight's meeting. Just one word. I'm doing the screen here today, but if I could write my one word, it's activate. I really want to focus on activation today. So we'd love to hear who here is on the call and what are some of the things you'd like to see accomplished. I want to formally introduce the Health and Equity Task Force. Again, you can see we have a cross-section of professionals from all over Sacramento who are providing their expertise. Some folks who were born and raised in the neighborhood, other folks who have an interest based on their commitment to Sacramento. Really want to make sure that everyone here is recognized. Again, these individuals are volunteering their time. This is not a job. This is really a passion about collaboration together. Again, I want to thank all of these individuals and thank everyone on the call today for your commitment, taking your time, because we realize, particularly with the conditions that we're in right now, that every time and every second is precious. So we realize that commitment today is important. And I'd be remiss if I didn't say right now, again, as we're dealing with fires and many of you are suffering directly from that. You know, our hearts go out to you, our prayers are with you. This has been a difficult season for all of us, from COVID, racial violence to fires and wildfires and food inequity, it's been a difficult time for our community. But what makes Sacramento great and what makes Meadowview great, as you guys told us, is our ability to come together, to embrace those differences, embrace that diversity, and come up with amazing solutions that can't happen anywhere else but here. So again, we realize today is tough, and we are so thankful you're taking your time today. Wanted to remind folks of what our goals are. Again, our goals right now as a task force are really about addressing these concerns, using an equity lens, making sure that we're focused on community empowerment, engagement, and partnerships. And we believe we can do that by the delivery of a toolkit, the facilitation of urban plan training programs, and the development of a community-led site activation project. Today, we're going to talk a lot about the toolkit and the activation project. So those are the goals of the task force. But now is the time we really want to hear your goals, and using as many words as you would like. So we need to ask right now, as we talk about goals, what we want to achieve today. We want to celebrate community assets. We want to learn and share best practices and identify activation ideas, share the toolkit concepts. But if you could in the chat, write down what are some of your goals for tonight. Again, they can be anything that you're looking for. We want to hear from you to make sure that as we have our small group conversations and our breakout conversations, as we have the opportunity to hear from some experts from the East Coast, some experts from the Midwest who are working on projects in communities that have some similarities to Meadowview. We want to know, what are your goals? What do you want to hear? What do you want to learn? What do you want to share? So write those down, put those in the chat. And Joanna is one of our team members, is going to be looking in the chat. And so we'll give you guys 2-3 minutes to write those ideas down and let us know, what are some of your goals for the day? So Joanna, I can't see the screen, but if you want to take a look and maybe share some of the goals that we're hearing, either the one-word goals or the more in-depth goals for today from our community members and our attendees.
Yeah. Well, first, I think your initial question, there's looks like there's a common theme right now. Teamwork and collaboration is what a lot of you guys talked about. Engagement was some of the issues that were called out, being community-led. Rita also says collaboration. Deborah says innovation. And then going down, Jeff talks about cross-cultural sharing, which I think is really interesting. Daphne talks about seeing more job opportunities in commercial businesses in District 8. So I think we have a lot of great feedback here.
Great. And keep those coming. Again, don't limit it to just right now. If you have an idea, that a light bulb that pops up, write it down in the chat, because we want to make sure this is value added, because the reality is this can't be successful unless we're all bought in and this is a collaborative process. So as we have this conversation, again, we realize, particularly after our last discussion with community members, it's really important for us to hear some best practices of how other communities are addressing issues related to land use and transportation and equity. And so we've been lucky enough to have this great equity advisory team that has been working with us across the way and are taking their time to talk about health equity focused land use planning, transportation planning, and community engagement. And so I'm happy to introduce Charles T. Brown from Equitable Cities. He and his teammates, Tiffany and Robin, have been phenomenal and have some great information that they can share. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen so you can see Charles, and he's going to go ahead and share a brief presentation on the great work that they do.
Good afternoon, everyone. It is indeed a pleasure to be here. I want to thank the team at ULI Sacramento for giving me an opportunity to be here with you today. As I've stated to them in the past, it's extremely important to always engage with the community and to elevate their voices. So I'm really proud and happy to see that of course, they've heeded that wise advice and they're doing exactly what they've stated they were going to do when they engage with me, Tiffany, and Robin. So I have about 20 minutes tonight, but what I want to do really quickly is share with you why equity matters in creating a safe, equitable, and inclusive system for all. In order to talk about equity, though, it's very important right up front to give some brief definitions or principles in regards to equity. So equity, first and foremost, involves trying to understand and give people what they need to enjoy full, healthy lives. That's why me and the ULI team are here with you tonight, because we want to understand and give you what you need to enjoy your full, healthy lives. But we also understand that equity is the presence of justice and fairness within the procedures, the processes, and distributions of resources by institutions and systems. So we do not believe that a process that doesn't center your voice and elevate your voice is a just and fair process. Again, that's why we're here. But then lastly, as we promote and talk about equity, we believe that facing equity issues requires an understanding of the underlying or root causes of inequalities and oppressions within our society. So what that means in short is that we would not dare invite you to a process without addressing the elephants in the room, such as systemic and institutional racism, climate change, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so as we talk about equity within the context of placemaking, within the context of transportation and mobility, what we know is that on a nationwide level, those most at risk from transportation decisions and planning decisions are older adult, people of color, and people walking in low-income communities, because they, as a whole, are disproportionately more likely to be involved in fatal crashes while walking. In fact, when you look at older adults, their relative pedestrian danger index for those 50 and older is more than a third higher than the general population. And when it comes to people of color, Blacks between 2008 and 2017 were 72% more likely to have been struck and killed by drivers while walking. And then lastly, when it comes to low-income neighborhoods, people living in neighborhoods where the median household income is $36,000 or less, they were killed at a much higher rate than their counterparts. Now, this matters because whether you identify as a person age 50 or older, or Black, or low income, we can pretty much assure you that at some point along your journey, you are traversing through one of these neighborhoods. And by doing so, that increases the likelihood that you yourself, even if you do not identify as older or Black, you are more likely to also be at risk of being hit by a car. So at a bare minimum, this should hopefully encourage some empathy in you as you consider what strategies we need to ensure safe and healthy communities for all. We also know, in looking at the map here, that if blue represents where white people live, green represents where Black people live, purple where Hispanic Latinos live, and orange and yellow representing Asians and other nationalities, what we know really quickly here that even in Sacramento, a place as diverse as it is still segregated among race and ethnicity. I usually have a series of other maps that I can show throughout the country, and what you'll find is that similar places too are suffering from racial residential segregation the same way Sacramento is. And so from a public health standpoint, what my colleagues Tiffany and Robin would say is that this leads to historically risk behaviors, disease and injury, and mortality. But lately, the public health profession has started to team with the transportation and mobility professionals, and now we're all taking a look at how does the living conditions impact risk behaviors, how do institutional inequities and social inequities such as class, race, gender, and sexual orientation impact institutional inequities, impact living conditions, and then how those impact your risk behavior. Some of you may have been saying, I crossed that street mid-block because it was safe to do so according to me, or I live here for this reason, or I do this for that reason. You're not entirely wrong when you say that. Your living conditions do sort of breed an environment in which it either encourages you to make a decision or it does not. And then there are inequity implications associated with this, as we know that one's race determines one's place which determines one's health. Yes, your race determines your place, which determines your health. And in the state of California, currently for pedestrians, California is the sixth in the nation, the 16th most dangerous. So then the most logical question is, when we look at Meadowview, how can Meadowview engage with and benefit from an equity-focused planning model for the built environment? So what I'm going to do now is introduce to you some justice principles and then show you examples from around the US of how those justice principles were applied and what the successful outcome was. So first and foremost, when it comes to this justice framework, there are 5 different things I want you to keep in mind. There are distributive justice, procedural justice, interactional justice, representational justice, and then care. So as residents in Meadowview or in the city of Sacramento as a whole, or wherever you travel to, always ask these 5 questions about a process or about any sort of transportation or mobility or urban planning process. Ask, is there distributive justice? Is there procedural justice, interactional justice, representational justice, and care? And so you may ask, what are these things? Please write this down. The first one is, you should always ask the question to ensure that a process is equitable is who has access? Who has physical access to the street, to the park, to the trail, or to that open space, or to that undeveloped space that you're attempting to activate? Who has access to it? And it's important to remember as part of asking that question that proximity isn't access. If you live adjacent to something but you can't get safely to it, you don't have proper access to it, and thus the distributive justice is not present. And also when we talk about who has access, we're talking about a people. So regardless of race, ethnicity, income, sexual orientation, etc., but also the different modalities, whether one can get there via walking, via rolling, via biking, via e-scooter, or via car. I mean, all of this is important when you ask the question, who has physical access? This is important because as I've done research across the country, I know that most parents don't feel safe for their kids bicycling in their neighborhood, and then fewer people can actually safely get to local parks or trails from their homes. So again, proximity is not access. The second thing you should ask is who has influence over the design, the operations, and the programming of a particular space. If people of color are not present in that process, you do not have procedural justice. This is important not only for their adults, but also many of the young Black and brown teens who are usually absent from these processes, but are some of the first to be victimized by these decisions. Then we must ask, thirdly, about interactional justice. What makes people feel welcome or unwanted in the space? So if you're activating a space, what good is it if you've beautified a place, but not all people feel welcome in it? This is important because the research showed that, for instance, Black males are 2.5 times more likely to be killed by law enforcement, and they're also being stopped at a rate 7 times that of female. So when you're looking at Black and brown males and site activation, et cetera, if you're over-policing that place, you don't have interactional justice. That is something that everyone must consider when making a decision about how the programming, the design, and the operations are taking place. Then fourth, there's representational justice. Do people feel their experience and history is represented in the space? There is no space that exists without a history. So it's important that those who take ownership of the space remember that history and acknowledge that history. This is important because too often historical and cultural erasure takes place in communities across this country, particularly in Black and brown and low-income communities, where redevelopment or development happens without the insight of people, and thus their history is eliminated. So as you move into site activation, please keep in mind the importance of representational justice, because there was someone who occupied that space prior to you. Then there's care. Care is how do people demonstrate, you guys want to mute, make sure you mute yourself. How do people demonstrate their care for the space and other people in it? So it's not enough to just build it and they will come. you must also maintain it so they will come again. And then once you've sort of put in place the processes to maintain a space, it's also equally important to make sure you treat people fairly when they are in that space. So those are 5 sort of forms of justice, questions that you can always ask to ensure that you get the equity and inclusion you want. And this becomes even more important as you look at design and other considerations, because women and religious minority groups are often excluded from a place, even though you have proper design, you have proper care and maintenance, but you don't have proper respect for persons. So it's important as you move throughout these processes that you continue to advocate for the protection of all groups. And then there's the question, where has this process worked in favor of the residents? So what I'm going to do now is kind of briefly speed through several different examples from around the country where I've seen these processes be successful. The first one is in New York City, where I was called to do a fishbowl discussion on race, place, and public space, biking while Black in New York City. This process took place from over a 1 to 2.5 hour period. The whole point of this process was to allow the residents to dictate the topics and to control the conversation. Yes, I was present as an expert, but I was there to ensure that order was in place, not necessarily to dominate the conversation. So the residents had the floor, and the recommendations that they came up with benefited not only the city, but all of those who were present that day. A similar effort took place in the city of Baltimore, where I engaged with the Hispanic and Latino men and women to understand how we could increase their bike share equity and access. And so this was a process that took place early in the morning and late at night, trying to be respectful of when they were available to attend. So with that, you got interactional justice, you got procedural justice, but most importantly, we were able to identify what the barriers were to them fully benefiting from and being involved in the Baltimore bike share system. Because as many of you may or may not know, Black and brown people are often left out of those discussions and often lack access to quality micromobility options. A third example here is from the city of New Brunswick, New Jersey, where through procedural justice, interactive justice, care, and distributive justice, we were able to come up with the first ciclovia or open streets program in the city of New Brunswick. And if you're not aware of what an open street program is, it is a program where you close the street to cars and you just simply allow people to bike, walk, be active in our largest public space, which are our streets. That program was its first of its kind in New Jersey. It has continued to be replicated, but these programs exist all over the world. And it's a great example of what happens when you give the community its voice. Another effort was about collaboration and partnership. When the community has spoken about its needs, and then you tool or pool your resources together to bring in the health groups, the public health professionals, to talk about through multidisciplinary teams how they can be servants to their community. And so this is an example from Virginia, where I partnered with the Virginia Department of Health to create the Virginia Walkability Action Institute, where they bring in a multidisciplinary team of professionals, planners, engineers, public health professionals, and we teach them over a course of several months how to be better stewards and how to increase walking and walkability in the communities that they serve. And then not too far from you in Suisun City, I was invited to work with the Solano Transportation Authority. They wanted to prioritize equity. This process led to us engaging with the community, the stakeholders there, this equity working group, and ultimately what came out of this was the first ever equity chapter in a comprehensive transportation plan in Solano County, or in Suisun City, but for Solano Transportation Authority. So when you prioritize the voices of residents and you put in place the processes for decision makers to make true decisions, this is one of the best examples of what could manifest from that. But then I take you to Charleston, South Carolina, where they've never had a process where they discuss openly the sort of challenges around health, transportation, housing, structural racism, etc. But as you can see here in this picture, using these justice frameworks that I mentioned to you. We were able to get people in the room who had never been in the room together for the first time. And it led to Charleston being on its way towards complete streets adoption and policy implementation at a level that's going to really benefit everyone involved, but particularly the most vulnerable on their roadways. And then it takes me to New Jersey, where we have seen communities say time and time again that their communities are unsafe. We need engineers, we need planners, we need environmental professionals to understand this. And so we have created a complete streets training program for engineers and planners so that they can be more aware of the harms that Black and brown and other people face on our street each and every day. Which takes me now to northern New Jersey, Hoboken, where I was, Jersey City, I was privy to know that there was a process that elevated the voices of people through walk audits and then a tactical urbanism project. What you see here is short-term improvements that were proposed by the community and that were put in place, which led to a reduction in speeding and an increase in safety at key intersections throughout Jersey City. And all of this was based upon feedback from the residents. A lot of the temporary things that you see here eventually became permanent. And so Jersey City is now on the cusp of becoming one of the most bicycle and pedestrian friendly cities in all of America. And then that takes me now to Trenton, New Jersey, which is one of the most under-resourced cities in all of America. I'm showing you this because if it can happen in Trenton, it could happen anywhere. And so there was a few dangerous intersections throughout Trenton, and the people wanted to know what could be done to slow down traffic. So we all engaged with the residents, we engaged with some tactical urbanism experts, and what we did was came up with a concept around unity, where we did a street mural, and we did before and after evaluations. I'm here to say that the evaluations proved that the paint actually led to a reduction in speeding, which of course means that it's safer for everyone. If you're looking for me in this photo, I'm the guy with the Yankee shirt on. That takes me now to Cranford, New Jersey, where there was a public space outside of a post office. And the community said, what can we do to make this safer for everyone? So through a process by the North Jersey Transportation Planning Authority, which is a regional planning organization, Sustainable Jersey, which is focusing on environmental and sustainability planning, we all put together a concept and provided technical assistance to this town to reimagine their public space. This is, in essence, site activation. Here's the concept, but then here is the final outcome of that. You can see that they closed off a street, added in additional seating, made it safer for pedestrians, added in the trees, the greenery, etc. And then this space is going to become a space that is not only safe for pedestrians, safer for motorists, but a space that people can enjoy post-COVID. Ironically, this design came forth pre-COVID. So it's been an absolute honor here to share with you a framework to ensure that equity is present throughout all your processes, and then several examples of how the framework has been used to realize or actualize the needs and the concern of the residents. And so I want to leave you with one of my favorite quotes, which is, never forget that justice is what love looks like in public. And so it's been a pleasure. Here's my contact information. I want to thank ULI Sacramento, ULI in general, and each of you for being here tonight. And if there's time for questions, I would certainly make myself available to answer those. Turning it back over to you now, Hugo and team.
Thank you, Charles. Really good information. And again, we're going to make sure all of this is in everyone's hands. And we're going to take an opportunity to ask Charles some questions in the moment, but we want folks to get into their breakout groups and to get to our second speaker, who's going to provide some more examples. But just as Charles mentioned, you know, that community input and feedback is vital to the success of any project. And again, we asked the question last time, asked again, what would help to further activate and leverage these assets that you know and love in your neighborhood? And so there's some assets that you guys have identified. And two that actually came up in our last conversation were opportunity areas. One at the Florin Road RT location, that parking space, and the 24th Street bypass park. Again, what we did in the last session for folks who weren't there, we took a look and we broke out into groups and identified a number of opportunity sites. And those that were identified with near-term changes, the top two were the Florin Regional Transit Site and the 24th Street Park, or the Florin Bypass Park. So what we'd like folks to do is to break out into groups right now, and Mary's going to go ahead and break us into groups for about 8 minutes. You're going to have a facilitator there. We'll have team members to help take notes. Think about some of the ideas you saw from Charles and others, and also remember some of these ideas that we discussed in the last meeting. Again, different housing types, green spaces, sports spaces, but be creative. Think outside the box. Art, recreation, sports. What would you like to see? With these two blank canvases, and we have partners at the city and partners at RT that want to partner, we want to know, what is it that you want to see? What are some of the assets you'd like to see to be able to activate that space for your community in the near term? And then maybe what are some of the barriers, or what are some of the things you would need to make that happen? So we're going to do the breakouts right now. Again, we're going to take about 8 minutes to kind of go into that space. Mary, any directions as to what folks need to do with the breakouts, or will they just get kind of zapped into their space?
Well, we are doing that right now. So just a couple minutes, everyone. You'll go into your breakouts.
So you don't have to do anything. You're going to end up in another room, and the facilitator is going to help you with that conversation. Daphne, you have a question? You're on mute right now, Daphne.
Can you define what the 24th Street bypass is in detail?
Bypass is the park. If you're driving down the 24th Street swoop, it is the park on the west side. And there's the facilitator will have a map that shows the proposal for the 24th Street bypass. And you'll have the opportunity to work from that map. Welcome back, everybody.
8 minutes.
Jose, that was my first Zoom breakout session in my life. Thank you for that. That was kind of cool.
Great job. Yes.
First of many, Rob. We're going to do some more of those as we do stuff in ULI. So
Yeah.
appreciate it. I got to ask though, Linda, how was it? Was it okay? All right.
That was great.
All right. Well, really good stuff. Again, we're going to talk real quickly. Leads for breakouts. Don't forget what you guys discussed, because we're going to go into our Go Green Racine conversation and we're going to get some feedback as well and open up for questions. So I want you guys to share a little bit of what you guys discussed. But we have, again, our speakers are from the East Coast and Midwest. We want to make sure they can get to bed and put their kids to bed. So with that, I want to introduce Sana and Chris from the Go Green on Racine project. They're gonna go ahead and share their screen and tell a little bit about what they've been doing in the Englewood neighborhood and some exciting stuff I think that folks can apply here in Sacramento and Meadowview. Sana, Chris, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Jose. And it's great to see all of you. I actually have my screen on gallery view so I can see everybody. It's great. I just want to say, first of all, my name is Sana Sayed. I'm the Director of Strategic Initiatives with the Inner City Muslim Action Network. And of course, you have also with me my colleague, Chris and Marie Spencer from Wheeler Kearns Architects. And just, before I get started, just giving you like a 1-minute version of what Go Green on Racine is. Essentially, Go Green on Racine is an equitable development neighborhood initiative. So we take the word equitable development very seriously, and the fact that this is a neighborhood development, neighborhood initiative is also a very serious part of our project that aims to really bridge the health and wealth gap in the neighborhood of Englewood in Chicago, in South Chicago. So just to tell you a little bit about, Englewood used to be a really buzzing, really thriving neighborhood back in the 70s, 80s, 60s even. And slowly, obviously, with the history of redlining and discrimination and all of that, we lost a lot of people from Englewood. Obviously, there was the white flight, but also, I'm sorry, I had a little, yes, obviously we had the white flight and all of that, but then also the redlining and rapidly led to a decline in population to a point where we had, you know, when Inglewood hit its lowest population standards. And around that time in 1994, the Chicago Transportation Authority shut down the Green Line, which is, you know, one of the lines, transit lines in Chicago, shut down the Green Line for renovations. And when they reopened, never opened 6 of its stops. One of those stops, first of all of those stops happened to be in African-American neighborhoods. Obviously, there was an outcry around what seemed like a very racist kind of act from by the CTA. And one of those stops happened to be at the very intersection where our initiative is, which is 63rd and Racine. So 63rd and Racine is an intersection in the heart of Inglewood. Really, it's right in the, you know, it's really in the heart of Inglewood. And the Racine Green Line station is a station that remains to this day abandoned. The neighborhood also has a very high degree of foreclosures, like many low-income neighborhoods do. It has a closed school that has been vacant since 2013. So in this context, we wanted to, Chris, can we share the screen if we have it?
I think I'm sharing it. Am I not?
Maybe
No?
No, it's possible. It's just maybe I'm not seeing.
We don't see it.
Oh, you can't? Oh.
I can share it, Chris. I can share
Yeah,
it. I have it right here.
could
Yeah,
you share?
I
Okay.
do. So this is Go Green. I'm gonna view slideshow here. Hold on. Okay. So this is really, like I said, it's called Go Green on Racine and Inglewood Rising Project. And in the context that I just described, this is an initiative that is being led by 4 partner organizations. So it's 1, the Inner City Muslim Action Network, 2, the Resident Association of Greater Inglewood, also known as RAGE, 3, Teamwork Inglewood, and 4, EG Wood. These are, the 3 of those are all Inglewood organizations. Iman, the Inner City Muslim Action Network, which is the lead organization, is right in a neighbor organization. We've done a lot of work in our history in Inglewood, but we are based in Chicagoland. So with this coalition of people, there are 3 major developments that we're trying to introduce into this intersection, which is a very blighted intersection. There really isn't much happening here. One is a community fresh market, which will, you know, it will have co-op inspired values, but will serve fresh produce to over 10,000 residents in its immediate neighborhood who don't have access otherwise to fresh produce. It will also have the regenerator, which is the closed school that I was talking about. It's the closed Woods Academy, and it will be transformed into a hub for supportive housing, re-entry services, and green enterprise. Supportive housing meaning really for returning citizens who are coming home and who really don't. Inglewood has the largest volume of young men and adult men or older men coming home from prison, at least 1,000 every year, and has zero infrastructure to really to stabilize this population and to really receive this population and integrate the population into the fabric of the community. So the regenerator will be a place which will house, provide the transitional housing, but also all types of re-entry services, whether that is the health clinic, whether that is a legal clinic, whether it is workforce development, and then also we'll have a focus on green enterprise. We all know that the 3 factors for the most successful re-entry are housing, employment, and healthcare. And these are the very 3 things that seem elusive to all returning citizens. And that is a core problem that we're trying to solve with the regenerator. The third development that we will introduce into this intersection is called Racine Village. It will be a mixed income development. It will have rental units. It will have a business incubator, which will be led by one of the partner organizations called E.G. Wood. And we're also bringing in a restaurant that is actually currently in downtown Chicago. We're bringing it into Inglewood. So essentially, as you can see, this is the intersection. This is on top is the regenerator. Right here is the fresh market, and right next to that is Racine Village. So these are 3 catalytic developments. We believe that if we bring them into being in close succession, we will really jumpstart a sort of a catalytic momentum around this intersection. And in doing so, we will revitalize both the 63rd Street corridor, which runs east-west, as well as Racine corridor, which runs north-south. Along with these three developments, we have two accompanying strategies. One is a transit advocacy strategy. I told you about the story of the Green Line Station. There was a coalition that was formed when the Green Line Station was closed down all the way back in 1994. Members who were part of the Green Line Coalition are still members of the Resident Association of Greater Inglewood today. So when they first heard about Go Green on Racine and our plans to one day in the longer term, like 5 to 10 year goal, one of our 5 to 10 year goals is to reopen the Racine Green Line Station, they were so delighted because they remember standing and protesting the closure of that Green Line Station. So one is the transit advocacy campaign. In the near future, we want to just acquire a lease for the shuttered station and transform it into a community asset. We will also be working with, on rapid improvements. So whether that is pedestrian improvements or streetscape beautification, improving walkability, etc. And in the long term, like I said, our goal is to reopen the Racine Green Line Station. Our second accompanying strategy is a housing vision. As I mentioned, there's a lot of foreclosures around the 63rd and Racine intersection. And a lot of these properties actually have very good architectural heritage and great architectural value. So our goal is over the next 5 years to renovate 350 vacant units in partnership with a developer called McLaurin Development Partners, who is a Black-owned developer. But also in partnership with our own participants of the workforce development program. So like I mentioned at the Regenerator, we will have workforce development. In the history of our organization, we've done workforce development in the construction trades, carpentry, electrical, and HVAC. So we will be utilizing the workforce that we are developing and funneling and creating a pipeline of jobs of alumni of our programs who will be working on these homes. And then also we will simultaneously be setting up a home ownership pipeline and a strategy for Inglewood residents who are predominantly renters, who are not owners of the properties that they live in, even though they may have lived there for 15, 20 years. So the idea is to create strong roots through strong home ownership, both for existing Inglewood residents as well as for green reentry participants. So really, if you look at Go Green on Racine, we're targeting these different areas. It's a very comprehensive neighborhood revitalization plan. We're targeting housing. We're looking to increase the quality as well as the availability of homes over the next 5 years. We're looking at businesses. We're looking to see how we can introduce, something like the fresh market. What would that do? An incubator, what would that do? What would a green hub really do to catalyze business opportunities around the intersection? We're also paying close attention to workforce, because it's not just the revitalization and the rebuilding of the neighborhood, but we are as much, and if not more, invested in rebuilding lives. And we know that there are people that are young men as well as older gentlemen and other residents who are directly affected by systems of oppression, who do not have access to work, who do not have access to employment, and who do not have opportunities. So the creation of a strong workforce that will mobilize this revitalization is really critical to us. We are also trying to bring amenities into an intersection. As you might know, if someone can spend, just like rule of thumb, if someone can spend 20 minutes at a particular intersection, they will usually travel a fourth of the time to be there. So if you can spend 20 minutes worth, you can do 20 minutes worth of something somewhere, you might be okay about traveling 5 minutes to get there. If you can spend 2 hours there, then you might be okay traveling 30 minutes to get there. So if we want to bring in more, if we want to bring in increased in density, because this is a ghost town, frankly, like the intersection that we are working on is completely blighted. There isn't really much around there. And if we want to infuse density and, liveliness, dynamism, we really want to create amenities so that people can spend more time at the intersection. So we're doing that obviously through all of the, the restaurant, the fresh market, the amenities basically that all of these three catalytic developments will provide. And then obviously we're working on safety and social fabric. The fact that we have a very people-centered approach to development ensures that we are not only, like I said, rebuilding the neighborhood, but also rebuilding lives. And thereby we're reducing recidivism, we're reducing crime, and we're bringing greater stability to our community. And lastly, we are paying close attention to transit and streetscape. Like I said, we will improve walkability. We're aiming, 63rd and Racine is also a high crash zone. So we're trying to improve pedestrian safety. And then obviously we're partnering with the city on long-term transit improvements. Inglewood rising, really the fact is that our neighborhood has the key assets and the momentum that is necessary to thrive. Like the way we've organized our projects, we have proximity to transit and economic centers. We have community leadership and engaged residents. We also have support from city leadership, and I'll say a bit more about that when we talk about challenges. And also we have financial incentives for development. So when you do your own sort of evaluation of your neighborhoods, we have to see what kind of city incentives, what types of state incentives, what types of federal incentives are available that you could capitalize on. So for us, we have the Neighborhood Opportunity Fund, we have Invest Southwest, we have an enterprise zone. We also have TIF, TIF areas, and this, when you select a location, the more types of funding that it is qualified for, the better, the more sort of momentum you might have. And then we are also eligible for new market tax credits based on where we're located. So developing this intersection, as you can see, there are two zones, there are two commercial nodes. Say there's 63rd and Halsted. There's already an Inglewood's Whole Foods there. There's a Chipotle. There's a few things. There's an open green line station. There are some resources. So 63rd and Halsted is a budding commercial zone. And then you have 63rd and Ashland on the left, which is also has a number of small businesses. It also has a operating green line, and it also has some resources like a library. In between, 63rd and Racine at the moment really doesn't have anything. But through Go Green on Racine, we're trying to introduce, and you will see what we're trying to introduce into that intersection. And by so doing, we not only strengthen 63rd and Halsted and 63rd and Ashland, we also create connective tissue between these two nodes. And not only do we create connective tissue, we also draw from the existing density and visitation at 63rd and Halsted and at 63rd and Ashland. So our goal is not only to strengthen in turn those two nodes, but also draw from the strength of those two nodes and then create connective tissue on along 63rd so that we have a continuous mile of a strong commercial node. 63rd is one of the corridors that the city has identified as a commercial corridor. So we want to sort of create continuity in that corridor and not have a portion, a significantly large portion where there really isn't anything happening. And once we open the Green Line station, you'll see that all these three stations really work as an ecosystem. At the moment, the train just zips by Racine. It stops at Ashland, and it zips by Racine, and then it stops at Halsted. And also a trip to the city, which should technically only take 30 minutes, but because of waiting times, et cetera, it takes 50 minutes. So there's really a lot of disadvantaging through the closure of this Green Line station. So finally, of course, our theory of change, obviously I haven't, because of time, I can't tell you so much about our context, but really we have, decades of experience, both Iman does, Rage, as well as Teamwork Inglewood and E.G. Wood. And we have a shared context of work upon which this is based. So none of the things that we are proposing are absolutely new in the sense that we have a history of work in food ecosystems. We have a history of work in re-entry. We have a history, you see what I mean? Like we've done this work in other forms, and now we're trying to take that to the next level and really create a neighborhood revitalization plan. The activities that we introduce are the three catalytic developments as well as the strategies. The outputs are the immediate sort of immediate fruit of that. What are some of the things that immediately change once that happens? And outcomes, how does introducing those developments shape the neighborhood over the next 3 to 5 years? So it's a longer term sort of, and then impact. How does doing this affect, how does it build resilient ecosystems? How does it affect the health gap? How does it affect the wealth gap? In later, you can see this is a sort of, I don't want to spend time here, but essentially, this is how we've broken it down. This is kind of how we anticipate change happening. And we had to make this very clear to funders and to, invested parties to see exactly how we are, expecting this to change the quality of life in the neighborhood. And obviously also make it very clear what our projected impact is going to be. And for the purposes of this group, I'm just sharing this to share that this part of the project is really important, especially as that you are able to be very confident about what the impact of your efforts are. So having said that, also demonstrating that you have strong partnerships. So one thing I'll say about this is an initiative that is led by, with, and for residents. So the residents are in the driver's seat. However, we have brought to the table sufficient, very interested and very well-known entities from across Chicago as well as the nation. So for example, we have Harvard Law School working with us on the legal clinic. We have the University of Chicago. We have Kirkland and Ellis. You know, all of these partners, so to speak, who are interested in contributing to the project, who are interested in getting their names behind the project, but who remains in the driver's seat is the core team, which are neighborhood organizations here on the left. And I'll let Chris talk a little bit about the architectural renderings, but I know that there were a couple of questions that you know, folks had around that were shared in advance around, you know, how we came about as a team. Like I said, we've all been working with each other informally over the past decade, and it really made sense for us to do this together. It really made sense. It would not have made sense for Iman, for example, to lead this effort without the, you know, strong local Inglewood organizations being with us. And then we also wanted to get really clear about our roles. So who's playing what role? So some organization is playing the local hiring lead, someone is playing the community engagement lead, we are playing the fiscal agent. You know, we are also responsible to getting the work done and meeting our outcomes, etc. And then there have been, you know, there was a question about how we're financing this. So really, essentially, the majority of the dollars are philanthropic dollars. So we've had to find, so in terms of financing, we've, the fresh market that I mentioned has been in the works since about 2 years. And we have been slowly and gradually, sort of really over the last year, been accumulating the funding that is necessary in order to complete the project. And Chris will tell you more about the project itself. So we are nearly complete on funding for this project. And over the last few months, we've been trying to raise money for the next project. So it's not that we have money for the whole thing all at once, but that we have money from one project at a time. So most of it is philanthropic dollars. We also have some state and city dollars. So essentially, like I said, all of those incentives like Neighborhood Opportunity Fund, New Market Tax Credits, TIF, etc. And we also had to kickstart the project through a loan from a credit union called Self-Help. And lastly, and not least importantly, individual donors who really see, and this includes both the ones who have lots of money to give, but also those who have like 50 and 100 bucks to give, because that also shows power. It's a demonstration of power. It's a power building tool when you can say, okay, you have 500 people who are, you know, funding this project at whatever levels. It kind of, that's where you can leverage that type of buy-in, community buy-in and broad-based support at the philanthropic level, at the city and state level, etc. And I know we wanted to talk a little bit about challenges. And I'll just wait for Chris to go, and then in the end, if I can share some of the main key challenges that we've had, and also how we are working to, you know, mitigate them. So Chris, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Hi. Can you guys see my screen? Now I had to take. Can you see my screen?
No. Should I stop sharing, Chris?
Yes. Could you stop sharing?
Yes. Yes.
Oh, okay, great. Hi, I'm Chris. I'm gonna do my video for 2 seconds. My internet connection's pretty bad here at home. So I'll share my video for 2 seconds so you can see me, and then I'm gonna go. So, okay, so as Sana mentioned, we've been working with Inner City Muslim Action Network for about 2 years, maybe 3 on the Fresh Market. This slide that I'm showing is our project. Our project is the building on in the background with that yellow. I don't know if you can see my cursor. Hold on.
We can see.
This is our building back here. As Sana may have mentioned earlier, many low-income neighborhoods in Chicago lack access to grocery stores with fresh, healthy food options. And neighborhood corner stores have traditionally stepped in to sort of fill that gap. And some corner stores do provide fresh fruits and vegetables, but the mission of the Fresh Market is to do just that. It's to provide fresh fruits and vegetables for the neighborhood. Okay, so I'm gonna clear my screen. So our project is, the Fresh Market will be housed in this building. It's a 2-story masonry building. It's about 7,000 square feet. And it's one lot west of the intersection of 63rd and Racine. The building has been in the neighborhood for many years. It has been there, we think, for as long as since 1902. This 1905. This is a Sanborn map, and from this map, we can tell that very early in the 1900s, this building was always a grocery store or some sort, not a grocery store, but a store of some kind, and it had 4 apartments on the second floor. But the first floor always functioned as a store of some kind. So a neighborhood asset was always in this building. So in the 2000s, I think a fire originated on the second floor in one of the apartments on the south side of the building. And that caused significant damage, resulting in a loss to the neighborhood in an asset. Because again, this was a corner store. And so the neighborhood lost an asset and it gained another vacant building. Luckily for us, for the past 2 or 3 years, we've been working on re-envisioning what this building could be. And the ambition, I think, of the Go Green on Racine project has always been one to restore and reuse rather than replace buildings. And in this project in particular, it's restoring and reusing a building that has significant historical context and history to the neighborhood. It's an attempt to keep that intervention familiar rather than an intervention that's alien. So the project is really, right now, the project is in a restoration phase. The exterior of the building is being restored and repaired, reinforcing the exterior and interior masonry walls while replacing roof and floor structure. We envision reintroducing the large glazing or storefront system that was previously there and reduced over time. In doing so, we'll invite the neighborhood to see, we'll invite or welcome vision into the store through these large glass openings. We're also considering layering in West African motifs and color, which are inherent in the neighborhood, and we believe will help us anchor the building back into the neighborhood because we're taking cultural references from the neighborhood and imparting it on the facade of the building. We're leveraging visibility into the store by placing produce right along the storefront, and we're also placing activity on the street by introducing window seating along the street. So there will always be activity right at the street. And in doing so, we believe that community members will be able to see what's happening in the store and will therefore enter the store and want to participate in what's happening in the store. Okay, this is a view looking from the south end of the store, from the south end of the building. In the future, the near future, we think that easternmost lot that we saw in the previous slide at that intersection, it will be developed into some sort of community garden. And that space will be used for events. It will be used as a breakout space for the fresh market. It will again, make use of a currently vacant space by reactivating it with program. So this is the fresh market. This is what it will be on the first floor. This is a plan on the left side. You're looking at a plan view of the store. It's roughly 3,000 square feet on the first floor, and it's completely dedicated to the fresh market. Customers will enter the store on the west through a vestibule where they'll pick up shopping carts. And then they'll be immediately ushered into the store down aisles with fresh fruits and vegetables and goods, and then back out into out to the street. You'll notice that renderings on the right, you'll see that we're introducing a large skylight in the center of the store to bring daylight down into the middle of the store. And we also feel that this introducing this will help pull in customers, because it will help frame activity that's happening beyond in the back half of the store that's back in here. And back there, it's just, it's like a prep kitchen. The store is very efficient. As you'll notice, we've maximized prime floor space for merchandise while minimizing on-site storage. So there's very little storage on site. We're using most of our building footprint to display goods, fresh fruits and vegetables and dry goods. So this is more than 2/3 of the footprint. We're not using a lot of it for back of house. And this is intentional because, again, our footprint is very small and we need to be as efficient and effective as possible. So again, all the support spaces are in the back of the store. The second floor space will be used by Iman and other organizations for community outreach. It's two large conference rooms on the north end of the store and north end of the floor, and simple open office spaces in the back. So again, the footprint it's not a big footprint, but we're using it as efficiently as we can. So where are we now? We are in the middle of construction. We are trying to stabilize the building. We are stabilizing the building. You'll see that over time, because the building had some deterioration issues, we've replaced all the structure, and we've taken out all the old structure and we've now put in new structure. And we're working really hard. There's a big push right now just to get our building fully enclosed so that we can work on the interior. And our plan is really to get everything done and open by spring 2021. So this is where we are now.
Thank you, Chris, and thank you, Sana. Really want to appreciate this example again, and I think you can see in the chat. There's some questions. Want to make sure that we open up for Q&A, and Charles is back as well. So again, we had two examples, or not two examples, multiple examples, but this most recent example of what's happening on Racine in Englewood is amazing, and the work that Charles has. Really would like to open up some questions to either of our speakers. Right now, I do see a question from Daphne as it relates to, what's stopping us from bringing larger grocery chains in the community. Not necessarily something our guests can speak, but did ask, is it a co-op store? So maybe Sana or Chris, would this be a co-op, or is this tied to a national chain of some sort?
No, it's not tied to a national chain, and there is actually a Whole Foods that is at 63rd and Halstead that I mentioned, which is like 5 minutes away. It is not there. So there is a Whole Foods, but the problem with the Whole Foods is that obviously we're not in competition with it. We love that there's a Whole Foods right there, and we think we want to create more of an ecosystem of lots of food retails, but the fact is that not many Englewood residents are shopping at Whole Foods. Only 20% Englewood residents are actually shopping at Whole Foods. Out of the 100% of Englewood Whole Food shoppers, 80% are actually from other neighborhoods. They're coming into the 63rd and Halstead to shop at Whole Foods. The reasons are affordability, perception, all of those things. Plus there is a culture of corner stores. And I didn't say much about this, but we actually have done over the last 14 years a lot of work with corner stores, because a lot of residents in Englewood and neighborhoods like Englewood usually rely on corner stores for their primary food source. And essentially, we do know that there is a history of corner stores not operating in the best possible way. So we've had a corner store campaign over the last 14 years, and we will be working, even when we open this market, it will not be a co-op at its outset, but it will be co-op inspired, because we will have memberships. So we will have members that are Inglewood members, local members who will have their own set of privileges, but we will also have like a broad-based membership campaign called Friends of the Market. So even though you live in California, for example, but you like the project and you support the mission and you support the cause of the project, you can still become a friend of the market. So no, it is not going to be a grocery chain. It's going to be a local store that demonstrates how to do business in a neighborhood like Inglewood. And it demonstrates this not only to the Whole Foods of the world, but also to the corner stores who really need a prime model to follow.
Thank you, Sana. Any questions for Charles from the group?
Yeah, I had some questions as well. This is Enoch. I'm just sort of interested in what the overall capacity is of the local service partners. You mentioned kind of business development, social services. Were these partners from outside the neighborhood, or were these partners who were within that area or local who were contributing to the area?
Right. You mean like the partner organizations?
Yes.
Yes. No, we're all local.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. The partner organizations, the core team, Iman, Rage, Teamwork Inglewood, and EG Wood are Inglewood organizations. The partners, more broadly, like Harvard Law School, etc., they're more sort of like participating and contributing, but on our terms. So they're coming in, but they're coming in on our terms. We set the stage. Yes. Go ahead.
So what about the service organizations providing services, like you mentioned business development or, supportive services?
Yes. So EG Wood is the one. EG Wood is one of the partner organizations. They provide the business development. So that's what they do. And workforce development, Iman actually does that. We do that. So that's why we're saying that this is not just us creating these assets, but we've actually have a history of doing this work and providing these services. We are a federally qualified health center. We have a robust arts and culture department. We've done re-entry work for the last decade. We've done organizing that. So we are providing the services. So even the programming is being done by us. That's what your question is here.
Yep. This is Matthew. I have a quick question. Hello?
Yes, of course.
Okay. So one of the things that happens in communities like Inglewood and Meadowview and South Sacramento, we find a lack of financial institutions. So for instance, in the Meadowview area, we don't have a bank in the area. Have you guys addressed that situation of access to just the everyday financial services that people need?
We have not, but there are other organizations in Inglewood, like the Inglewood Chamber of Commerce, etc., who are trying to make themselves kind of create, do exactly what you're saying, basically be sort of like a financial institution that supports local businesses and entrepreneurs. But we will be providing other types of support to businesses and entrepreneurs, not financial though.
And why is it, again, why is there a strategic reason for not saying, let's bring in a Chase Bank, let's bring in a Golden One, let's bring in a Bank of America into a community to provide those services that most people look for every Friday, Saturday?
Right. Right. Okay. So really, we talked, we didn't get a chance to talk about activating the community and building civic infrastructure, but we've been doing that for the last last decade or more. We have an Inglewood Rising campaign that Rage led. We've had the EQLP, which is the Inglewood Quality of Life Planning. And if you look at the Inglewood Quality of Life plans, the needs that were identified as priority needs are the needs that we are addressing. A bank was not one of those needs. Re-entry services was, job creation was, workforce development was, food was, health was, legal aid was. So we're looking at what the community has identified as the biggest tripping stones and the biggest blocks to quality of life in the neighborhood. And we're trying to address those needs because we don't believe, we want to have banks, we want to have financial institutions, we want to have all sorts of development, but we need a strong foundation that serves the residents first and stabilizes the lives of very low income and highly, at risk individuals before we start to do that. Does that make sense?
So not really. Can I ask a question? Is there a reason that there's no financial support to what you're proposing in Inglewood? I'm familiar with Inglewood and I've lived there. So I'm just curious, is there a reason that there's no, like Matthew asked, banks, financial support for the community along with the food and everything else that you're providing?
We actually do. We have, like I said, philanthropic investments. One of our funders now is JP Morgan Chase, but they're coming in through their philanthropic arm. So there is a CDFIs are, you know, getting behind it, but it's going to take some time, to be honest.
What it does is it pulls the resources out of the community as opposed to developing within the community. So is there a plan to develop within that Inglewood neighborhood, understanding that fresh produce is a viable, important part of what they need? Is there also a program that you're trying to propose to allow them to be self-sustaining in that neighborhood?
And just before you answer that question, guys, this will be the last question that we have for the big group. We do have to get the breakout, but go ahead and Sana, if you can answer that.
To be honest, I'm not quite sure which of these projects you think are taking resources out of the neighborhood. Could you clarify that?
Anytime you put a business within a community or a neighborhood, their resources go into that business. How is that business pouring back into that neighborhood?
It's owned by the community. So if it's owned by if it's owned by the leading organizations in the community that are reinvesting that money into, for example, with the regenerator, it's not a business. The regenerator almost is like serving, you know, programs and services. It's providing re-entry services. We're actually going to have to get grant funding in order to be able to even provide those services. So the regenerator is not so much of a business. The fresh market is a business, and any revenue that the fresh market generates will be utilized in one of three ways. We have an entrepreneur support network. We have a corner store consortium, so we will be building up other food retail in the neighborhood. And then the third will be in the fresh market or food security fund, which will go into providing food to residents who are food insecure and who are on food stamps or who don't have access to food. So it's not supposed to be a business that actually will take money from the neighborhood and then take it somewhere else. It's all going to remain in the neighborhood.
Really good feedback. Charles, Chris, Sana, really appreciate it. There's a lot of similarities in some of the neighborhoods that we have addressed here in this Meadow project, but in Sacramento in general. Appreciate your feedback. Ladies and gentlemen, if you have additional questions that you couldn't ask, again, we're going to share the presentations and share the video. Send those to us in the chat, send them to us in the emails afterwards. We still are maintaining contact with Sana, Charles, and Chris, and the rest of the team. Again, we want to learn lessons, things that have gone well, things that maybe could improve, so we can apply them as appropriately here in Sacramento. But I want to make sure they have the opportunity again to get some rest tonight on the East Coast. Thank you guys so much for taking your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you. So ladies and gentlemen, I want to just do a quick check-in. We promised to get you in and out of here in 90 minutes. I'm going to take that promise and I'm going to ask for a little bit of grace here because we want to give you some time here for this last breakout and to get into the toolkits, which is extremely important. So what we're going to try to do is do a shorter breakout. It's just, we're going to go 5 minutes here. And the breakout is really going to be focused on one of the key things that Daphne brought up, is that when she talked about the idea of these businesses moving forward, how do we ensure that the community members and those benefits stay within the community? And a lot of that comes from having, in this case, Iman is the group that kind of runs this organization. They are the community champion. And so the question that we really want to ask you as you go into your breakout groups are, who are the existing community champions within Meadowview, or what either as individuals or organizations that can take this idea or concept? Let's brainstorm. Are there groups that already have some momentum? Are there some groups that are undertapped? Are there churches? Are there schools? Are there individuals with significant capital? And then what do those champions need to be successful? So we're going to break you guys into groups. Again, we're going to just go 5 minutes, and we're going to come back, go right into the toolkit, and then we're going to get you out of here by about 6:40. So if you're cooking something, just have them stay warm for a little bit, and I appreciate you guys being graceful with your time. So Mary can go ahead and break you out in your groups, and that way we'll talk about the champion aspect, because the idea is we want to get some ideas from the group so that we can reach out to those individuals if they're not here and make sure they're involved in this activation idea that we've been discussing throughout the last 2 minutes. So see you all very soon.
What were you?
Welcome back, everybody. Anybody who's in my breakout room heard a phenomenal musical concert? No. So real quickly, everyone, again, thank you guys for adjusting with us today. I want to have our room representatives give us a little bit of summary of what they heard from the 2 breakout sessions. So I'm going to start with Bernadette, then I'm going to go to Joanna, then to Kendra, then Adrian, and then Debbie. But you can tell us a little bit in just 1 or 2 minutes. One, what were some of the ideas for site activation that you heard? And then 2, what did you hear about the champions and what are some of those barriers? So let's start off. Bernadette, number 1, how were your breakout groups and what did you hear?
Yeah, do you want me to answer both quickly?
Yeah.
Okay, so in our breakout group 2, we talked about what folks would like to see, affordable housing, and they clarified that we want it to be well-designed, mixed use, activating. So that was one thing that we heard loud and clear. We also talked about connectivity. We had folks who were interested both in transit through regional transit, as well as bikeability, walkability. As far as the question of who could be leads, specific organizations identified were New Hope CDC, which is part of a community church, SETA and other reentry and workforce development groups, ethnic chambers, and then examples held up like Alchemist CDC and Soul Collective. 2, the take-home messages were, we want to make sure that we're supporting nonprofits and helping build their capacity, and then really leveraging ethnic chambers and some of our local organizations. And I'll just pause there and pass it to the next person.
Really good feedback, Bernadette. Let's go with Joanna.
Okay, so our group, we talked a lot in the first slide about not necessarily those 2 opportunity sites, but how as a whole, there's a lot of different opportunities within the Meadowview region. And when we went into breakout group 2, we talked about partnerships with potentially school districts, and there wasn't necessarily anyone in particular, but how do we get a connection or a connective network of everyone who is partnering within the community so that people can connect together. We talked about financial institution as an important segment of the community, also job access as well. Cooper, did you have anything else to add to that if you wanted to, or Chris?
No, I think you pretty much got some of it. I wanted to highlight just a few things from Betty, who mentioned she grew up not too far away from the Meadowview area and is interested in hearing from community members, the school district, and youth. Daphne was very clear and explicit, correct me if I'm wrong, that the Go Green model falls short and it gives them, like a fix or a patch, but does not give them the tools to self-sustain. Lastly, Betty Lowe actually agrees with that in terms of economic development, and that multi-level support is really huge.
Really good feedback, everyone. Real quickly, let's go to Kendra.
Okay, thank you. So in the first breakout session, I thought some really about the RT station in particular, there was some good ideas of maybe having a farmer's market or some type of community space. Access to Wi-Fi definitely came up, and maybe even an equipment zone in that area for people to maybe increase ridership and for something for the residents to do while they're waiting to use public transit. Also identifying language barriers during this entire process to help level the playing field. Also identifying access to water for green infrastructure would be very important. And then on the second breakout, when asked with a community member about who are the current champions in Meadowview, she identified nobody as a community champion, but that she thinks, Sacramento uses the Meadowview neighborhood as a dumping ground and would like to see some equitable land use happening in that community, which is kind of coincides with what we're discussing today, but also something that she didn't feel was identified in this process, and that is education and improving the local public school system.
Really good points. I appreciate all the real authentic feedback from folks, community members. Adrian, you're good.
Yeah, so in our breakout group, there's a lot of consensus around the sort of activities that were identified on your slide related to the two sites, some agreement about the types of development, and then creating more physical activity opportunities at the park were both mentioned. Others more specific things, access to fresh food definitely resonated with the group. So thinking of partnerships with like Rayleigh's and Bel Air and looking at some of the local grocery store providers to see how they could partner with the community down there. Also, making sure access across Florence to the opportunity site from the high school is important. Related to the champions, highlighted again that there's a lot of strong neighborhood associations in the area, and that they are, will be good partners moving forward with the different opportunities that go on down there. And then the other one that was mentioned, I don't think has been highlighted tonight, is that the election next month, there's going to be a new council member, and so this may be a great opportunity for a new elected to have an immediate win, an immediate champion for something new and different in the district.
Great feedback, Adrian. Debbie, with the last group, what are some of the ideas that came out of the two breakouts?
The first breakout, we didn't quite make it to the second property. We focused a lot of discussion around the RT site on Florida and 24th. And Jesse suggested like a coffee shop or some kind of place where you get a beverage as you're riding RT. Another thought was around food trucks, to have mobile food trucks on site. And then I think where we got the most kind of traction and discussion around came from Rob, and that was something like a mobile tutoring trucks, where there would be resources on the site to provide mobile education support. It would be a mobile education center for youth with tutoring opportunities for adults. And then of course, meshing some kind of food with that, since our group was really into food opportunities integrated at RT. For the second breakout, we talked about people, organization, groups that could serve as champions. Education groups. I think a lot of our focus was on education and education support, proximity to Burbank and other, other schools. But so education groups, both schools and nonprofits that engage in educational support work, associations, business associations, restaurant associations, libraries was discussed, and as well as the African marketplace, businesses and gathering places that are in proximity. How do we further engage them at that particular site? Barriers, we just talked very briefly about that, and Jesse raised the issue of potential traffic.
Really good points. Thanks everybody for your feedback. So very quickly, again, we want to be respectful of time, and what we want to talk about a little bit. And Daphne, I know you have some questions about how, budget and what do we have capacity to do locally. So this is where the toolkit component really comes into play, is how we look at opportunities to really empower community members and work alongside community members to impact their community. And I did hear a question during the previous set of discussions is, how do we create an organization that gets the funding that the Racine folks had from some of these other groups? But one of the things we really want to talk about is that the toolkit recommendations that we're going to be sharing with you tonight, and we'll be emailing to you as well to take a look at and get feedback, are ideas that don't necessarily require a formal engagement or adoption by the city, but that also can be done in partnership with city government or with private industry as well. So we really want to focus on three key areas based off of what we've learned and seen, site activation, community budgeting, and planning and development engagement processes. And so what we're just going to lay out are some in these toolkits are really some guide paths to help community members navigate through certain spaces to get more development and more activation that's in consistency with their desires for the community that they live in. And so just starting off with this Meadowview Community Budgeting Toolkit process. And again, this is a draft. What we're going to be asking from you is your feedback on, does this make sense? Does this address your needs? Does it need more? Does the format need to be adjusted? So when we come back to you in November, we'll have something more fully fleshed out. But in the process is really trying to create a process for folks to really navigate the idea of community budgeting and participatory budgeting from a variety of different perspectives. And so starting with the first step of establishing a community goal and role. So figuring out what are some of the goals of this budgeting structure, and then what role would it be? Would it be a formalized role that's adopted by the city, or would it be a shadow role that's governed by the community in parallel? And then establishing what's the scope of that budget. Is that scope really specific to a budget amount or a budget type? Is it only focused on recreational developments or educational developments, or what might that be? And then coming up with a clear outreach and communication strategy. How do you get the word to community members, and how do you communicate on a regular basis? And then how do you collect and process the information that you get from community members? Establishing a process for a formal vote. And again, if this formal vote is done by a body that is a representative body, or whether this is something that's done strictly within community guidelines themselves, figuring that out, and then finding a way to communicate that voting result. One of the things we've seen, some of the examples we've looked at, is the participatory budgeting process is in existence, but the communication gaps can exist and maybe isn't as conclusive as it can be. And ultimately transitioning from that voting process to project implementation and creating a cycle and feedback loop. And so here what we've included is just some more details to that process. But the idea would be is creating this and providing this option for community members to kind of take as a shell and apply to the specific needs, some of these activation ideas that folks have discussed today, whether they be near term or long term, and negotiate, as mentioned by Adrian, maybe with the new incoming council member as to how to leverage this process. I know it's something that's been discussed at the city level as maybe being formalized, but this was a process and a tool that we thought that we could help develop to help guide this process potentially for community members. And we would like your feedback on it. Does it address your needs? Is there more that needs to be added to it? A second tool is really focused on site activation. And again, this is just, again, a guidance document about how to facilitate activation. One of the things we've learned in our communications with a lot of the folks on this call and other communications is particularly with COVID, finding ways in which to activate a site in the near term has been difficult. The processes are difficult, they're confusing. So we thought by maybe laying out a process, it might make things a little bit easier. So if we were to focus on celebrating diversity and community as a part of our activation process, it's really starting with what are the goals and activation ideas? Where are the funding sources? Do they come from the government? Do they come from private funding? Are they community consortiums that pull it together? Identify those locations early on as to where these activities and activation areas might be. Coming up with your own grading system as to determine what the priorities might be. Developing a marketing and communication plan. Establishing some guidelines and rules. One of the things we've talked about, we heard in the last was, if we were to do a farmer's market at the RT site, what would the guidelines and rules be? What could be sold? What couldn't be sold? Who establishes that? The community group would come up with those guidelines. Understanding that permitting process, really getting a better understanding of what permits would you need to be able to activate the site early on, and then acquiring those licenses and permits to be able to move forward. And then looking at community outreach and grassroots promotion to make sure that community members own the process. I know that in our initial first conversation way back in March, our friends from RT talked about, how there had been some attempts to do a farmer's market at some time, and one of the gaps was getting that community engagement. And so maybe if it's owned by the community, there's more buy-in. And then lastly is doing that site activation and kickoff. And going back to what we discussed, who will be that community champion to own this effort, whether it be an individual, whether it be a group, whether it be a consortium. Again, we think this process, and again, as itemized here, can help guide someone who has the idea, has a great idea, but maybe doesn't know how to implement it. And so that's another step that we're looking at sharing and getting some feedback from the community groups. The last one here is a little bit more complicated. And again, this one probably needs a lot more feedback. When we start talking about these development projects that, and I heard Enoch mention some of the things he wanted to see developed at the RT site. A lot of times by the time we get involved as community members, it might be almost too late. It may be already designed. So really understanding kind of the 4 pillars of the process is the identification, the pre-application process, the entitlement process, and in the public or formal review of a project. What are the current processes and where are the areas where community members can get involved? So one of the things we talked about in terms of site identification are there opportunities right now for members of the Meadowview community to identify, to take a look, assess the community, and identify key locations and nodes that you would like to focus on beyond the opportunity areas that we identified before, and then leverage partners like ULI to be able to interact with those landowners and or the city to start having conversations about what your big ideas were. So I saw Daphne, I know you have a number of ideas for certain locations. How do you get involved in that process early to maybe help drive that and get some buy-in from community members, which will facilitate the development process? In the pre-application process, how do we make sure that your community organizations, your community associations are on the distribution list to be able to get input into the process? It's a gap that we've identified, is how to make sure that community representatives are involved. We realize that a lot of times you don't hear about a project until it's already gone past the pre-application process and you have less of an impact. So how we start that process. And then in entitlement application, how do we make sure the distribution process gets information? And Kendra happens to be on our team as a planning commissioner, and she's going to send out a link to the current development training process. It currently shows all the projects that are out there. We'll share that with you guys as a part of our distribution feedback. And then making sure that folks are involved in that staff level review and get some more transparency about who at the staff you can communicate with. So the next draft of this, we want to be able to have some more guidelines and steps so you can better navigate the process and know who to ask questions of if the project is happening in your neighborhood. And then lastly, given that sometimes projects get reviewed, understanding that review process, understanding what projects get reviewed at City Council, at Planning Commission, or get reviewed by staff, and trying to share that information so you have a better opportunity to participate in that process. And so again, we went a little bit long with our presenters, but we really want to get some feedback from folks about these draft flow processes and making sure that they make sense for everyone as we start to discuss how to better engage in the overall process. And so what we will be doing as a part of this, again, we have all your contact information. We're going to go ahead and share a PDF with a PowerPoint with folks. We'll also post this on our ULI Facebook site. But we were a little bit over time, but in a couple minutes, is there any immediate feedback in terms of, are any of those processes that rise to the top as a point of importance? Is there something that we're missing in terms of an important process that you're looking for in a toolkit?
Jose, to get more effective community engagement, I think if you flow charted those 4 steps that you had, how the community inserts themselves in those 4 steps, at what point do they communicate that, that would help the community to be more interactive.
Great feedback, Daphne. We will definitely incorporate that into the next draft. Anybody else?
I think also just really having a continuous schedule, right, for folks. I mean, I think part of the issue is just also just having consistency. So maybe I know I'm not going to be here for this meeting, but you know what? Every first whatever of the month, you know, this is going to be happening and this is going to be here. And so I think just continuously using social networking and getting that out. I mean, just having that reminder is super helpful.
Good feedback, I really appreciate that. Anyone else?
If these recordings could be available to the public, it would be a great help if there's a way we can refer back to them.
We will actually post both sessions online, a YouTube link to both on our ULI Facebook site. And so you will have access to all of these conversations, because the idea is to make sure that this isn't just a one-time conversation. And so really the goal is to take these ideas, and again, there are some activation opportunities in the near term that we're shooting towards. But the other key piece in terms of what next steps we're taking, what we did talk about is, in addition to providing some of these toolkit components, is really building up the champions list that you guys talked about before. And then we'll be providing an urban plan training on November the 7th. November the 7th will be a training for community members. Our urban plan training we talked about before is a great tool that ULI offers that provides community members with a better understanding of the whole development process. My friend Rob Aragon, who's up there in the upper left corner, is a developer in this region, and I appreciate him coming out because I know that he has a true passion to make sure that every community has access to an understanding of the development entitlement process. This training on the 7th will provide that. So we'll look for that invite. We'll be restricting that to 30 people so that we can effectively do the trainings. We're gonna have to do them online because of COVID, but we're still gonna move forward with that. So I, again, apologize for going long and overtime today, but I hope it was valuable, particularly hearing some examples of how some groups have taken it and put it into fruition. Again, not everything applies to Sacramento, not everything applies to Meadowview, but we want to make sure that folks know that this goes beyond just conceptual, that we're looking at these processes and trying to make sure that they can apply to real change that you need and you want in the Meadowview community, that ULI is doing this alongside you. Will is here from DC. It is just about midnight, if my math is correct, and my math probably isn't correct because I studied history. But Will, do you want to maybe send us out with just a little a passing note?
I don't want to keep folks here any longer, but just I want to thank you for your time and your commitment to your neighborhood. And the conversations that you're having in Meadowview are being elevated at a national level and will inspire communities across the country to address health and social equity issues. So I thank you for your work at the local level, and then how that is going to inspire change nationwide in partnership with the other 3 teams that are doing similar work across the country. So Jose and the rest of the community, greetings and thank you from Washington, and keep doing what you're doing. It's inspiring.
Thank you, Will. Thanks, everybody. And I'll share one last tidbit, just the work that you guys did in the last 2 sessions. Our friends in Los Angeles are anxious to hear from you because they want to know how the folks in Sacramento at the community level are staying so engaged. So I'm proud of Sacramento all the time, but I'm especially proud of everyone here on this call. Thank you guys so much. Please keep your eyes and ears open. Give us transparent feedback, what's working, what's not. We always want to get a little bit better every day. Have a blessed night. Thanks for staying in overtime with us.
Thank you, you guys. It was a really good session.
Thank you. Thank you.
Everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So all the boxes are gone.
I'm gonna outwave you, Jose. Oh no, we could be here all night. Just
Thanks, everybody.
This is being recorded, just so you guys know.
I'm actually going to say good